Hey everybody, it's Master Galengeist here, bringing you my review for the season premiere of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, 2-episode premiere. And those 2 episodes would consist of A Shadow of the Past as the first, and Adrift as the second. And I'm going to bring this up. Amazon needs to figure out what kind of style it wants to do with these things. I hate when they half-ass this shit with just 2 episodes to premiere, or some cases 3 episodes in The Boys, and then you're like, okay, how do I do this? Do I do one at a time or all together? Either let us have it all out to binge, or just do it weekly. I don't mind a weekly one. I don't mind a binge one. Just don't try and do it both. Amazon is the only one that does this. Netflix does have a pretty good one. It will sometimes do weekly for certain shows and sometimes do binge for other ones. And you can usually figure it out what's going on with each one. So it's like if it's weekly, it's not going to be like, here's a 2 episode premiere. So that's my only real big gripe, other than like we get to a certain kind of story portion and it's kind of like boring. Other than that, I was really actually happy with what they kind of did with this. Now, granted, I am not that I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, but I'm not deep into the lore and everything. I haven't read the Silmarillion, so I'm gonna have to do that at a certain point. I've read The Hobbit, and I think I see. When I was in school, they were like, you can't read the books that you've already seen the movies for, so I had to read, like, The Return of the King. I think I've read through the other ones, like The Fellowship and The Two Towers at certain points, but it's been a while. But I've always been a fan of Tolkien's work. I really like the way The Hobbit's done. It's put off as more of a children's story, but I mean, there's still some heavier kind of elements that you can see brought into other kind of things, but it's just a kind of light-hearted kind of work, and it's a kind of cool world to tool around in. This goes, of course, more with what we've seen in The Lord of the Rings with the heavy kind of shit, and they really info lore dump on you, but the thing is they at least do it in a kind of interesting way where it's not just Galadriel being like, I'm going to word vomit on your ass and it's going to be fucking boring, yeah, because they showcase other things going on. And it is really kind of cool to get into Galadriel's backstory and to get into how stuff goes on with the Second Age and getting like introduced to Morgoth. And by the way, the pronunciation and the production values of these episodes are fucking great. Like, I've also been looking into like House of the Dragon, and like to actually compare the amount of attention to detail, like you could look at this and be like, all right, this looks like it could definitely be part of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. The Hobbit has some weirder, funkier kind of shit going on, so it's always kind of like, what? But holy fucking shit, there's like certain kind of things in House of the Dragon where it's like, okay, this armor looks good, but that helmet looks like a styrofoam piece of shit. Or that weird fucking wagon thing that people are, like, the royal family's getting trounced around in. And I'm like, that looks fake as fucking shit and some weird ass Jetson kind of shit. Like, this, you're like, alright, you got distinctive shit. The elven shit looks awesome. The dwarven shit looks awesome. The hobbit shit that we see fits within the characters in distinct kind of realms and everything. So it's like, okay, cool. I'm into this. So it brings up that Morgoth, who is the predecessor to Sauron, we get all that kind of stuff that he pretty much took the light from Valinor, which is like the Undying Lands, and the elves are like, fuck that shit, and decide to go after his ass because he then went to Middle Earth, and that's how we start seeing the seeding of more elves and everything, and having to deal with fighting Morgoth and his forces and his orcs. Granted, I could see how certain people could be like into the whole kind of thing of like there's orcs and then there's goblins and all differences of that kind of effect, and they're sticking mainly with orcs, I think, just to simplify it as much as possible because we've only got 8 episodes. And we kind of get that backstory. We also see that Galadriel made this like awesome boat, and then these kids were being assholes and fucking sank it with a rock, and that her brother Finrod tries to like talk to her about certain kind of things and try and be like, hey, shit happens kind of effective. Like, sometimes, like, do you understand why the boat floats versus why the rock sinks? It's like it's going towards the light. And I do think it's interesting how they are getting more nuance to, like, the light and the dark and good and evil and all that kind of stuff, because it is always an interesting kind of thing to get into it. That doesn't mean that everybody's a morally gray character that goes fucking Punisher style and be like, all my deaths that I fought, like, that I'm able to do are justified and you can go suck my ass kind of shit. No. But he's trying to, like, teach her a kind of concept of, like, then she brings up an important question. It's like, but what about you see a false light because the water can do it? And he then whispers something to her, but he goes off to war. He dies there, and she, of course, grows up and gets to what, like, I could term young adulthood, and sees, like, this mark on him as Sauron. And the thing is, they fight for a good while, and then Sauron is supposedly gone, and everybody's kind of, like, celebrating and whatnot, but she is hell-bent on taking on this evil. Not exactly, I mean, you could term it a kind of vengeance for her brother, but it's kind of more complicated than that, because we do see her bring it up in other portions, as she's like, I don't want this shit to hurt anybody else. However, she is just dogmatically trying to follow it, to the point that she's taking her people that she's leading into the north and just this frozen tundra and just pushing them so hard, and they are trying to be like, Commander, we need to go back. And she does find a fortress, she does find the symbol, but they get beset by a snow troll, and it gets nutty. Now, granted, it does not get completely nutterly like Game of Thrones or like Saw gory, but it's like, we get some people kind of fucked up, but she takes it out badassedly. It's like, this is not the Galadriel that we have seen before. This is a Galadriel that is still in soldier kind of mode and knows how to fuck around, and if somebody tries to find out about her ass. You know what I mean? It's really kind of cool, because it's always iffy to do an action scene, but it shows the competency of her sword and knife skills taking out this troll, and how good the CGI is able to work with people and CGI stuff working in one. And then her group's like, fuck this shit, we're done, we're going home. And she, of course, has to acquiesce, and she goes back. I think it's to Linden. There's a lot of places that it kind of bowls around to, and she's a big kind of part. This Arondir dude is another part, kind of linking up with humans, and then this Nori girl in the Hobbit kind of place. It's not the Shire just yet, they're more kind of nomadic folk at this point. So we'll kind of see how that kind of works out as she deals with her own kind of struggles. So let's hit Galadriel's kind of stuff more. She goes back home, she gets in contact with Elrond, and Elrond's trying to, like, help her. It's like, listen, can you stay? She wants to go out and find more. She thinks she needs to go further north. It's like, okay, you saw the symbol, and I know you're trying to find this. It's like, holy shit. But she's like, listen, look at all this sacrifice because of all these trees detailing all the people. And the thing is, she wants to talk to the High King to keep setting out. However, the High King pretty much is, like, rewarding her and her cohorts to going to Valinor, and during the ceremony she almost doesn't accept it, and she complains to Elrond about this, as he's pretty much more of a kind of politician kind of dude who's trying to figure out kind of shit and kind of deal with shit as well. And she's trying to express that she has this hurt and this darkness and everything, and she doesn't want this shit to happen again. She's like, why should I go to Valinor and have all this shit just still haunt me? You know? It's like, god damn, like, there's actually good kind of shit that they're trying to detail with what Elrond is trying to help her out, but since he doesn't have the exact kind of same experiences or similar experiences to draw upon, he can't help her with this completely, because it's, you can empathize and you can sympathize with her, but the thing is, she's got this thing that she needs to kind of work out herself, and she can get some help, but you have to have a certain kind of way to kind of go with that Elrond at this point doesn't have. So I kind of like that they're trying to do this as realistically as possible, because she's really dealing with a lot of PTSD, losing her brother, trying to make sure that whatever force that they defeated has been defeated. And the thing is, it goes to that kind of other side of, like, from the Harry Potter series, you've got Mad-Eye Moody expounding upon constant vigilance. And the thing is, that's kind of what she's hyper showing us right now. That it's the amped up, unhealthy version of that. The thing is, you got to make sure that you remove a threat so that way peace can, like, coexist and do some stuff. But always just be on the lookout for shit going wrong. But understand what is in and outside of your control. And she doesn't really have that completely figured yet. And then Elrond gets brought in with the High King, and he wants to start setting up some stuff and figuring some shit out. So he brings in Celebrimbor, who, with, like, the Lord of the Rings video game, was introduced as the one that was responsible for the forging of the rings. Now, granted, the thing is, previously before that happened, it was Sauron that came to the elves and was like, "Hey, buddy! Let me make some bling," and then he did all that shit himself, and that's why it was kind of, I believe, easier for his One Ring to be like, "I'm gonna dominate this shit." But this is what was kind of added to the lore, so I don't really fault it for that, and I kind of was alright with what was going on with that Lord of the Rings game, Shadow of Middle-earth. Yes. So, that's kind of bringing that. He needs kind of help, because we see Elrond pretty much put into his kind of thing. Now, granted, if this bleeds over, it's because I watched them both pretty much back to back, and we're just going to keep kind of rolling with it. And Elrond needs to help him. He's got a short amount of time, and he wants to build this giant forge to make these things. And the thing is, he's like, "Oh, how about we go to the dwarves?" And then, of course, he goes. He's like, "Yeah, I'll be welcomed by the son of. I'll be welcomed by Prince Durin." And of course, he is a big, pivotal figure within dwarven lore. And Elrond is like, "Hey, yeah, I'm a friend." And he's like, "Fuck you, man." Now, granted, in a little bit more of a polite instance, but then he, of course, springs a certain right, and he goes in. He's like, "All right, Celebrimbor, I'm gonna deal with this. Go off." So he goes in there, and the dude's like, "All right, we gonna pound rocks, and whoever loses gets banished from this motherfucker." And of course, Elrond kind of concedes. Because they keep going and doing their kind of things. And the thing is, an elf will definitely have endurance and strength. However, dwarves are built for that fucking shit. And Durin's able to do it, and he's pretty much walking out. And the thing is, Durin brings up valid kind of points. He's like, "Listen, you weren't here for my wedding. You weren't here for the birth of my children. It's been 20 fucking years, man. That's a lifetime to me." And it's not to Elrond. And it's really actually kind of cool to see this kind of friction, because elves are so long-lived. Like, if I was an elf and I, like, fucked off for, like, what I would consider a little bit, it could be, like, 50 fucking years for somebody else. Of course they'd be pissed. But the thing is, you're experiencing time in different kind of ways. Relativity, my friend. If you are longer lived and you have different kind of priorities and shit, of course shit's gonna get nutty. But granted, they do kind of work it out. He's like, "Then let me kind of, like, apologize to your wife," and then we're getting introduced to Durin's wife, Disa. And she's cool. I liked her. Like, I was interested to see how she kind of works out. I didn't know if they were gonna go, like, dwarf women have beards. And she's just kind of cool. She's like, "Elrond, come here. We're gonna have dinner." And Durin's like, "God damn it, you only get to apologize." And the thing is, we see his kids, like, running around with fucking things on their heads, banging at each other, and Durin's like, "Damn it!" But we see that, like, Elrond had gifted him a tree, and that Durin has been tending it, so he still values that friendship. And Disa, of course, goes into their relationship and their courtship. Durin trying to make it seem better on his kind of part, but Disa's like, "No, this is what happened and shit." And talking about how love was able to kind of help make that tree kind of work as well. And he's like, "All right, fine, tell me what you need, or what you're coming to do here." And we also then see that Durin talks with his father, and they look at something in a box. And that's about the end of it, and what I think that, like, Elrond gave the proposal. And I actually like all these actors that are working in here. Since I'm not that well versed with the lore, if there's any kind of big dramatic kind of changes, I am not really sensing it or seeing it. And I think that they inhabit their characters very well. They don't feel that like two-dimensional or wonky or kind of stupid at this point for me. Mainly, I get into certain kind of situations, lore-wise, that kind of happen. Not lore-wise, situations that happen plot-wise. And I'm just like, okay. It's weird because normally I really kind of like to see things rather than have it glossed over. But we get into the second episode with Galadriel, and I'd rather just been like, I gotta skip this. Alright, so there's that with Elrond and the dwarves. We pretty much are introduced to the hobbits with this Nori and Poppy? Mm-hmm. Yes. Poppy kind of annoys me. She could be a better character, but we see that the hobbits are kind of like doing their stuff. Nori's parents are kind of like going around and making sure that everything's kind of alright. They do a kind of maypole kind of thing, I think, or some kind of tent festival thingy. Nori and Poppy go and take pretty much the kids and are like eating these blackberries and shit and gathering up berries. They see a wolf and Nori's like, we gotta bug fuck out. And I'm like, okay, good. We see that she's kind of got the normal kind of eccentric kind of hobbit thing of they'll go and explore kind of stuff, but they will be smart enough to be like, we cannot fuck with this. Let's get out. As we see the wolf kind of go, they kind of get back. We kind of see the hobbits doing their kind of thing. This is the one that is kind of the least interesting to me at this point until we get to the point that we see that stars fall down and that there's a person in one of them. This is what I believe to be the introduction of wizards. I don't know who this wizard is, but it's either like Gandalf or Sauron. That's not Sauron. Saruman. Sorry, my bad. I get ahead of myself sometimes. Saruman or Radagast, maybe? I don't know who. But they kind of wheel him out, kind of put him in a place. He's called as the Stranger at the moment. And then he like gets up at a certain point. He's trying to like talk and shit, but it's like really forceful and in a language that neither of them understand. He tries to also communicate with fireflies. Evidently, some kind of constellation. He's got to get to a place that like can see that, and they do attempt to help him. However, Nori's father gets injured while she's trying to help the Stranger, and she feels very guilty about it. And I'm just like, yeah, I kind of get that. However, it's like they should have been doing this kind of better. Because he slips and like his foot is like fucked up badly. So we'll kind of see what kind of ramifications and everything kind of work out with that. But this just goes to show the longevity of like wizardly relations with hobbits. Do we want to get back to Galadriel? Yeah, let's get back to Galadriel, finish that out, and then we'll get to the last kind of elf-human kind of pairing thing. So Galadriel and her cohort go on the ship and pretty much are going to the Undying Lands, but Galadriel will not give up the dagger of her brother Finrod, and then decides to then just jump into the sea and then swim back. Like, the second episode is her swimming back, and it's just like, alright. Like, that could have been skipped over. Now, granted, we have not seen a lot of sea life introduced within the Lord of the Rings series and everything, so that was a nice thing. However, the execution of, like, she goes, she finds this group, their vessel was destroyed by this great worm thing, which we then see, and then it kind of disappears, and then comes back and fucking kills most of them, except for this Halbrand dude, and this is pretty much showing where Sauron's forces are. He's like, yeah, my shit got, like, pushed in the south. And she's like, alright, you're going to take me there. And then they get caught up in a storm, and then they end by being pretty much found by a boat. So I was just like, okay, I think there could have been a better way to kind of do this, i.e. either, like, not have her get on the boat at all, or just fucking teleport her. Like, I don't say that shit lightly. Or just kind of rework this, because I'm like, she's fucking far out there. To like come back, so it's like, so on one hand I'm like, I'm glad that they didn't just be like, hey, she just fucking teleported back to Middle Earth for fucking no reason. But then you're just like, it has to be interesting, and I'm like, alright, Red Shirt's gonna get killed, this dude's gonna exposit plot information that's relevant, hopefully he's handled better than that and actually does shit. And then Galadriel's like, I'm gonna go fuck that shit up. So then the other kind of portion that we're introduced to is Arondir, this pretty much elfin ranger that's pretty much in the watchtower and watching over this certain section because this group of peoples previously had pretty much been beholden and did loyalty to Morgoth, and they just keep like that kind of prejudice up, even though they're kind of different people, and we can see that animosity between the men and the elves and how they kind of treat them, which is an interesting kind of case. And of course, there would be friction between the races of Middle Earth. And seeing it because of this dude's been here for like 70 years, and he's more of a kind of stoic dude. And I'm like, oh, okay, he does have an interest in this one woman in the town, Bronwyn. And she kind of like gives him certain kind of herbal medicines and stuff like that, and they kind of chat and all that, and he kind of like goes around. We learn that they're getting pulled out, and that it's like, yeah, the war's over, let's get this shit done and get out of here. And he of course goes to kind of say goodbye to her, but then they see that this cow is not feeling that well. He like milks it and weird shit comes out. They go to see this other kind of town, see it destroyed pretty much, and that there's tunnels underneath, and of course it's orcs. Arondir pretty much gets like grabbed by him as we see this kind of interesting kind of chase scene underneath as they're kind of digging around, and he's like, fuck, get away, kind of shit that he's kind of doing. And I do like him and what he's kind of doing. Browan brings up the whole thing that like, yeah, do you think I'm bad? He's like, no. And we see that they do have a kindling. Of course, usually elf and men, elf and human kind of relationships always kind of get fuckity-doo-dah, fuckity-day. Except in certain kind of instances, because Elrond was born of kind of like, I think, he was like half human, half elf, but yet he decided to pick the elf portion. No, both of his parents were half elven. Okay, yeah. I just wanted to get that right. So we'll kind of see where that goes out. She's got another kind of like thing is that she's got an angsty teen, Theo, and it's just like, all right, fine. Him and this other dude pretty much dug through it and found like a Morgoth blade, and of course he's been pissed off because what he thinks are mice or rats are digging under the floorboard are actually orcs, and he hid in this one kind of thing. Browan kind of got back to the place, tried to warn the people. It's like, we don't fucking believe you. And then she and Theo kind of fight this one orc in the house, which was an interesting kind of fight sequence. And she chops his head off and be like, hey, bitch, here's the fucking proof. And they pretty much get out, and it kind of ends the second episode with Theo pretty much, he got gashed by the orc, and then the blade that was broken that he found starts feeding on the blood and coming back. And I'm like, you are a dumb fuck. Why the fuck would you like fuck with something that one, looks like that, and two, repairs itself with blood? But angsty teen's gonna do what angsty teen's gonna do because the plot kind of demands that shit. So those are the kind of bigger kind of things, but it definitely feels fantasy and Tolkien to me from what I've had from the other kind of things. More Lord of the Rings than like The Hobbit, but I really actually enjoyed it, and I'm interested to see how the characters deal with certain things. It does seem that they are introducing more kind of nuance and trying to really dig into more kind of concepts of what's kind of going on in Middle Earth and what kind of goes on with the relations between like elves and dwarves, hobbits and wizards and men, and just elves and other elves as well. It's kind of cool and kind of an advantage of a TV series to go through multiple kind of angles and stories to get those kind of things that you wouldn't when you have a bigger kind of story that you have a like 2, possibly 3 hour window or multiple movies that you're going through, and it's one cohesive thing, but you can get other kind of shit in here. So we'll kind of see how that goes down. But I really have enjoyed it, and I'm looking kind of forward to it. And seeing how they kind of work out with this. I have to hit it. Like, I've enjoyed pretty much what they've got with the characters, with the plot so far, dealing with the Second Age and Sauron, and what's kind of going on there. The production value is really good, like movie quality good. So if this gets like shit canned because it's too expensive, I'm gonna fucking understand that, and I can understand why Game of Thrones got bloated as fucking shit, and like House of the Dragon had to cut back on certain shit. So we'll kind of see how that works, but overall, I've had a fun time with it, and hopefully it continues to be a fun time for me. And if that's not for you, that's fine. I understand that they're definitely doing different kind of stuff with the lore, and we'll kind of have to see how that kind of works out. However, I'm not that deep with it, so if there are like really big inconsistencies, other than like Celebrimbor, that's one that's kind of been born out of like different kind of stuff that could potentially just be done mainly to make it easier because of what's been going on, but we'll kind of see. But just if there are certain kind of like egregious things that I have not caught, let me know, and we can see if there's a certain part in the series that they'll actually rectify that, or if that's done something that's like, what the motherfucker, whoa, that's gonna create something kind of bigger. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this to pretty much anyone that's kind of like in a fantasy. Watch out for like scary kind of things for like kids or people that really aren't into it. Now, it doesn't get to like horror level Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger kind of shit, but you could get scared for like, that thing's in a tunnel, that thing's fucking ugly as shit, that thing's head got cut off kind of shit. You know what I mean? So take with that as you will, and kind of see if you're interested or not. So those are my opinions on the episodes. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked them, if you didn't like them, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.